Hey you guys, the Doc is Hope here. So today we're going to be doing a sew along. We're going to be using Simplicity pattern 9337. This is a unisex pattern, so for all my ladies and my men as well who want to sew this up, this sew along is going to be for you. I really like this pattern for beginners because it is very simple. You don't have any darts in the pants. You don't even have any hemming because we're going to be doing some leg bands instead of hemming. So I really like this pattern because it's going to be nice and simple. This is actually a unisex knits pattern. We're going to be sewing up the pants today, which is view B here. Let me know in the comments if you also want me to do a sew along for view A. I think that could be a really cute set, and I don't mind doing that if you guys are interested. So your suggested fabrics for this pattern are your stretch knits, such as your cotton lycra, your jersey, your bamboo knits. So any of those. Today I think I have like a sweatshirt knit that I've had for a while. And I'll be using that. So let's go ahead and go over our notions you're going to use for C and D 1 3/8 yards of 1.5 inch wide elastic. I only have 1 1/4 inch, but I'm going to use this for my waistband, but you'll want to get 1.5 inch elastic to be correct and precise. You're also going to need 2 yards of 1/2 inch wide twill tape. That's going to be to make the drawstring on our pants. And I'm just going to be using some ribbon in black that I have had for like years. So get some ribbon if you can't find twill tape in the color that matches your fabric. And then also we're going to need a scrap of fusible interfacing for our buttonholes. And I just have a scrap of interfacing here, but I will be using that. And those are all of the notions that you're going to need to sew up this pattern. So go ahead and get everything cut out and marked, and then come back and join me. So let's quickly go over the pattern pieces that you're going to need. You're going to need piece 7, which is your pants front. You're going to cut 2 out of fabric. We're going to need piece 8, which is our pocket. You're going to also cut 2 out of fabric. We're going to need piece 9, which is our pants back. You're also going to cut 2 out of fabric. We're going to need piece 10, which is our casing, and you're going to need to cut 2 out of fabric. You're going to need piece number 11, which is going to be your waist elastic guide. And then lastly, we're going to need piece number 12, which is our leg band. You're going to also cut 2 out of fabric for this leg band. Once you have cut or marked all of your notches based on your size and all of your dots, go ahead and join me and we'll be ready to sew. Okay, you guys, so we're actually going to start off with our pockets. So go ahead and grab piece 8, and the first thing that we're going to do is press under 5/8 of an inch on the curved edge of the pocket. So I just kind of use my seam gauge to measure out 5/8 of an inch from the edge of this. And after you have that marked off, you're gonna go ahead and go to your ironing board and you're going to press this. I'm actually using like this gray fabric, but you're gonna use that line that you made to press this with your iron. And then once you have done that, come on back. Okay, you guys, so once you have that 5/8 of an inch turned in, we're gonna go to our sewing machine, and I'm gonna use a straight stitch, and I'm going to stitch 3/8 of an inch from the pressed edge. We're basically gonna use a 3/8 inch seam allowance to stitch down the part that we just pressed under. So let's go ahead to the sewing machine and do that. I am going to stitch, just lining up my needle, and again I'm using a straight stitch here from the bottom of that pocket all the way to the top. Make sure to back stitch. And back stitch. And go ahead and do the same thing on your other pocket, and then meet me back at the table. All right, you guys, so once we have our pockets stitched down, we're going to go back to our sewing machine. Well, first press the seam, press your seam. Then we're gonna go back to the sewing machine and we're gonna stitch from here all the way down and across at 5/8 of an inch. Again, 5/8 of an inch, stitch and back stitch all the way down, and we're gonna pivot at that corner and stitch to the bottom. So let's go ahead and start. Back stitch. Okay, now we're gonna pivot. So lift your presser foot and pivot your fabric, and then put your presser foot back down. And then we're gonna stitch 5/8 of an inch. All the way to the end. And back stitch. Go ahead and do the same thing on the other side, and then meet me back at the table and I'll explain more. Okay, you guys, so we're back at the table. Leave this part open. So don't do anything to this part. This is the folded edge. This is the part we're leaving open. Okay, so again, we're just using the stitching we just did as a guideline. And we're gonna go to the ironing board and press. Basically just fold right along that stitch you just did, and that's gonna give you a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And we're just gonna press that down. And then once you do that, come back. All right, you guys, so once you have that pressed, I'm just gonna work on one pocket. It should look like this. And we're going to now trim down this seam allowance to 1/4 of an inch. So I have my seam gauge here. And I'm going to, from the folded edge, just use my chalk. Okay, so now we know where to cut. I'm gonna grab my scissors. I'm gonna open this out just slightly, and I'm gonna cut right along that line that I just made with my chalk. Okay, so go ahead and do the same thing on your other pocket and then come back. Okay, you guys, so The next thing we're gonna do is notch out the fullness at the corner. I know you're probably wondering like, okay, what's going on here? At this little corner where there's like a double fold over of fabric. So we're gonna open that out and we're gonna take our scissors and we're just gonna snip diagonally, not through the thread, but just kind of right at the point where your two threads meet. And then that's gonna allow that to fold over a lot more nicely without all the bulk. So go ahead and do that on both of your pockets, right at that corner. And then we're ready to move to our next step. All right, guys, so now we're ready to move our pockets aside for like 2 seconds. Go ahead and grab your front, which is piece 7, and open that out. Again, make sure that you have transferred all of your notches and dots. And then also you'll notice on the pattern piece, there is a pocket guide here. So pocket line, this is where we're gonna put our pockets. So you wanna make sure that you have transferred this line onto the front of your fabric. So not the wrong side, but the right side. Go ahead and do that and then we'll be ready. Okay, you guys, so this is going to be the front of our pants. And we're going to take, so we have our line here for our pocket, and we're gonna also put our 2 dots on the front. So go ahead and do that if you haven't. I just had to take a second to do that. But now we're gonna take the pocket that corresponds with that side, and we're gonna keep it folded. We're gonna lay it right on that line that we made. We're also gonna line up those dots. So that should look something like this. And then we're gonna go ahead and we're going to pin this down. And then we're gonna stitch the pocket close to the front and the lower edges. So this and that. And then we're gonna also baste the raw edges. So we're gonna baste this top part. We're gonna baste this side part. But first, we're gonna go ahead and do step 1, which is pinning along that line. Go to the sewing machine. We're gonna edge stitch this very close to the edge in that L shape that we just did, down and across, pivoting at the corner. And then we're gonna use a long basting stitch to just baste down the raw edges at the top and also at the side. So let's go ahead and do that now. Hello there. Okay, you guys, so we are again using a straight stitch. I'm stitching very close to the edge of my fabric. No seam allowance here, just eyeball it. And we're gonna go very close to the end. So I kind of like to line it up and then see where my needle's gonna fall and then drop that down. And I'm stitching from the top down, pivoting and then across the bottom. So let's go ahead and do that. Make sure to back stitch at the beginning and the end. at the bottom, lift up your presser foot and pivot your fabric and put your presser foot back down and then continue. Make sure to back stitch. Okay, and now that I'm still here at the sewing machine, I'm gonna go ahead and baste across the side and the top like we talked about. So I'm gonna change my stitch length on my machine to a 4. And I'm just gonna first start across the top. So this is like the waist of the pants. And I'm gonna go at about 1/2 inch. I'm gonna baste right across the top just to hold that in place. I'm not back stitching because this is not a permanent stitch. And then I'm also going to turn this to the side seam, and I'm gonna baste again just to hold those raw edges together. All right, I want you to go ahead and do the same thing on the other side of your pants. Attach your pocket and then meet me back at the sewing table. Okay, you guys, so now that we have our pocket stitched down, the next thing we're going to do is stitch our front to our back at the inner leg seam. Grab piece number 9, which is this, which is your back, and we're gonna work on this one leg at a time. So remember, the front has your pockets on it, so we don't get confused at all. All right, so I'm gonna grab one of my back pants pieces, and we're starting at the crotch. So I'm gonna grab the pants front that matches up with the back, and we know that because once they're right sides together, we're gonna have both crotch pieces together. So once we have those together, we're gonna go ahead and start pinning at our crotch. And we're gonna pin all the way down to the bottom of our leg. So I'm gonna do a pin at the bottom first, like that, and at the crotch. And then I'm gonna kinda do this to make sure it's gonna lay evenly. And we're gonna match our notches here. That is our crotch seam pinned out. We're gonna do the same thing on the other leg, but first we're gonna turn this, and we're also going to pin our side seam. So turn your piece, and then we're gonna literally start again at the top on that one leg. We're doing this one leg at a time, you guys. And we're going to pin at the bottom. And then we're just gonna continue pinning, again, matching our notches here as well. So now we have both our inner crotch seam pinned and our outer side seam. Now that we have that done, we're gonna go to our sewing machine. This time we are going to use a zigzag stitch since this is where we want our stretch to happen. And we're gonna stitch using 5/8 of an inch from the bottom all the way along the side seam and then all the way along the crotch seam. And then you're gonna do the exact same thing on the other pants leg. So let's go to the sewing machine. I'm going to start at the bottom of the pants and at a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, I'm gonna go ahead and stitch all the way from the bottom up to the crotch. Make sure you back stitch at the beginning and the end. Make sure you back stitch. Now I'm going to turn to our side seam. I'm still working on the same pants leg. And we're going to stitch again using 5/8 of an inch with a zigzag stitch all the way from the bottom to the top. Make sure you back stitch. Okay, so we're gonna do a few things. Go ahead and first sew your other leg, side seam and crotch seam. Go to your ironing board and press these seams that we just put in place, and then trim any of your threads, and then I'll meet you back at the table. All right, you guys, so I went ahead and serged my seams just to clean them up. If you have pinking shears, you can use those as well, but I use my serger. The next thing that we're going to do is we're gonna, with right sides together, insert one leg inside the other. So I'm gonna keep one leg as it is on the wrong side. I'm gonna flip the other leg out. It doesn't really matter which one you choose to flip out. But we're gonna basically put one inside the other, and that's gonna cause our right sides to be facing. So I'm just gonna kind of feed that through. Okay, just like this. So you see that one leg is inside the other. We're lining up all those seams there. Nice and even. Okay, so this is how it should look. Once we have that done, we're gonna pin our center seam, matching the inner leg seam and the notches, and we're gonna stitch that, and then we're gonna reinforce that stitch by stitching again over the first stitching. So basically, this crotch seam here to here is what we're going to pin. So I'm gonna pin my seams here toward the back of my pants. And then I'm just gonna continue to pin together the crotch seam. First starting at both sides. If you need to turn it, you can, like so. And then we're going to match our notches as well. And then we're just gonna fill in some pins. Once we have that pin, we're gonna go to the sewing machine and we're gonna stitch just that U-shaped crotch area. And let's go ahead and go to the sewing machine. Okay, you guys, so I'm gonna stay with my zigzag stitch here for my crotch seam. And I'm gonna start at the top. And I'm gonna use a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Remember to backstitch at the beginning and at the end. Back stitch at the end. Okay, so that is our first pass. Make sure you're checking your bobbin thread because these are some very long stitches that we're doing. So we're gonna go back again over our first stitching just to reinforce the crotch seam. So I'm literally gonna do the exact same stitch again. stitch. Okay, now let's go ahead and press that seam at the ironing board and then meet me back at the sewing table. Okay, I don't know about you guys, but I can already feel how warm and cozy these pants are about to be. Nice fall joggers. So the next thing we're gonna do is grab our casing, which is piece number 10 here, and we're gonna work on our buttonholes. Okay, you guys, so now that we have our buttonholes marked on our casing, we're gonna turn it to the wrong side. I'm just gonna put a pin in the middle of my buttonhole so that I know where I actually want my interfacing to go. I'm just gonna work on one of these. So I've cut out my interfacing. I would say probably about a 1 by 1 inch piece of interfacing. I'm just gonna press them on just like this. Take your pins out before you press it so that you don't melt the plastic heads of your pin. All right, guys, so once we have that interfacing fused onto the casing, it should look something like this. But now we're gonna go over to the sewing machine and we're going to sew our buttonholes. I've set my machine to my buttonhole stitch, and I have attached my buttonhole foot as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and make my buttonhole, both of them, on the right side of fabric. And again, just follow the directions for your machine for your buttonhole and go ahead and make that now. Okay, so that is my first buttonhole, and I don't even know if you can see it. It's very tiny right here. So once you have that, I mean, you can see it better on the back, I guess. Once you have that sewn, you're gonna go ahead and do the same thing on this side and then the other casing, and then meet me back at the sewing table. All right, you guys, so once you have made your buttonholes in both of your casings, we're gonna go ahead and cut our buttonholes open. I'm gonna use my seam ripper, and I'm just gonna go into that buttonhole in the center. And I'm just gonna take a little bit of a snip through the buttonhole, and I'm just gonna controlly force. That doesn't make sense, controlly force, but yeah. I'm just gonna use that to open up that buttonhole, just a little bit at a time, till I get to the very end here. You don't want to cut through your stitching, but that's how we're going to open up our buttonhole, and it's going to look like this on the right side. So go ahead and open up all of your buttonholes, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, you guys, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to stitch our casings together, and you're going to put right sides together like this. And then you're going to stitch the seams, leaving an opening in the left side seam between those small dots. So those small dots that you marked here, we're gonna leave that open. And we're gonna make sure to back stitch at the small dots. So we're gonna stitch, first we're going to pin this. Well, we're gonna sew the entire left side of the casing. So let's go ahead and pin that together. Gotta do better, I think it's a habit, but yeah. So we're gonna go ahead and pin the other side as well, matching your notches, you guys. And I like to, let's see, we're gonna pin at the top to make sure everything's nice and even. And I like to leave 2 pins at the dot so that I know where to stop when I'm sewing and I don't mistakenly sew through that area. So 2 pins means stop. So we're gonna go to our sewing machine using a zigzag stitch. We're gonna stitch the entire left side, and then we're gonna stitch from here to here and then from here to here. So let's go ahead and do that now. Okay, so I've switched back to my regular presser foot. I'm going to start on the side that we're leaving the opening in, just to make sure I don't forget to do that. I'm going to start at the bottom, 5/8 of an inch, and we're going to go all the way up to our first small dot and back stitch. Don't forget to back stitch here. Coming up on that first small dot, so we're going to go ahead and stitch to that, and we're going to back stitch. And I'm not going to cut my thread, I'm just going to pull my fabric up to the next small dot and take those pins out. I'm going to stitch all the way up to the top of this casing. Back stitch again. And back stitch again. Okay. So we have left an opening here between the 2 small dots. You can see that opening there. And so now I'm going to turn this to the other side, and we're just going to stitch all the way from the front to bottom using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you've done that, join me back at the sewing table. Okay, you guys, so I went ahead and serged my seams. I only serged part of the seam we left open just because I don't want to mess anything up with the opening. But basically, once we have done that, they want you to press your seams open. And then we're going to actually fold the casing in half lengthwise with our wrong sides together. So like this. This is how we should be folding this in half. And we're going to have our raw edges even, and we're going to baste the raw edges together. So we're going to line up our notches. We're going to pin. Being pinned on your casing, we're going to go ahead and go to the sewing machine, and we're going to baste those raw edges together. Okay, you guys, so since this is a basting stitch, I'm going to go back down to a straight stitch and not a zigzag. And I'm also gonna raise my stitch length to a 4, which is the highest stitch length on my machine. And I'm going to start at one side seam, 1/2 inch, and I'm just gonna baste all the way around the raw edges. Okay, we're back where we started. And what this is going to do is just make it easier to attach the casing to our pants, because now instead of trying to match up 3 different layers, we're just matching up 2, because this is now technically 1 layer. So meet me back at the table. We'll go to the next step. Okay, you guys, let's go ahead and grab our pants. We're ready to attach our casing to our pants, which is exciting. So go ahead and turn your pants to the right side. Of course, your pockets are still in the front. And we're going to make sure that the underside of the casing is facing us. So we want that little hole that we left, that little opening, which go ahead and find your opening. Mine is right here. So we want that to be facing us. So facing up, and we're going to pin the casing to our garment, matching the centers and the side seam. So again, keep this facing. Okay, there I go with the pins again. Sorry, you guys. Keep this facing you. And if we remember correctly, this is our left side seam that's open. So these are our pants from the front. So this is gonna be the right, this is gonna be the left. So we're gonna put that opening on the left side. So just like this. Raw edges, even, left side, because when we put them on, we're gonna have right, left side is our opening, and we're going to pin this all the way around our pants. So I'm trying to turn it so that it makes sense, but let me see if a good way to, yeah. I think that's gonna work well. So once we have that side pinned, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna pin the opposite seam as well, side seam and seam of the casing together. So go ahead and match those up and then pin there as well. Once we've done that, we're ready to match up all of our notches. So in the back of the pants, you should have some notches that we're gonna match up here and here. And then also in the front, we should have some notches here that we're gonna match up that are close to our buttonholes. And we may need to slightly stretch our casing as we stitch this, because you might notice that casing is a little smaller than your pants themselves, but that is normal with waistbands. So we're just kind of pin this in place first and then take it from there. Okay, so now that we have that pinned, we're gonna go to the sewing machine and we're gonna stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And we're gonna stretch this as needed. And we're gonna be using a zigzag stitch. Once we've done our first stitch, we're gonna reinforce the seam by stitching about 1/4 of an inch from the first row of stitching. And then we will be ready to move on to the next step. Okay, you guys, so I am gonna start from one side of my seam, or from one side seam. I'm gonna start at the one with the opening, and we're just going to adjust back down to a regular stitch length using a zigzag stitch. And then we're gonna make sure to back stitch at the beginning and the end of this seam. And again, if you see that your pants are bigger than your casing, go ahead and slightly pull on your casing. and back stitch. All right, guys, so once we have the first pass of stitches done, we're gonna go back in 1/4 of an inch from that first set of stitches, and we're going to, I just use my presser foot and line it up with my first stitching, and that ends up being about 1/4 of an inch. And then we're just gonna go back around the entire seam. All right, so now you can go ahead and finish off that raw edge if you want to using your pinking shears. I'm just going to serge that, and then I'll meet you back at the sewing table. Okay, you guys, so once we have our casing attached to our pants, we're going to press the seam down towards the pants themselves, and that's just going to press out that waistband very nicely. So go ahead and do that and then come back. Okay, guys, so the next thing we're going to do is cut our elastic for our casing or our waistband. So go ahead and grab piece 11, which is our waist elastic guide, and set your pants aside for just a second. Grab your elastic, and we're going to roll this out the length of our elastic guide, and then we're going to cut that. And what I like to do is, hopefully you can see this, is pin one side of my elastic through the paper guide and then stretch it out just to make sure that I am not cutting it too short. Or you could pin it to the top, whichever way you want to do that. But basically make sure that you're not cutting your elastic too short. And that looks good. Right about there. And we have our elastic piece here. We can take off our guide and set that aside. And now we're going to use that opening in the left side of your pants, which should be inside, and we're going to get a safety pin, and we're going to feed the elastic through the waistband. So I'm just going to get a safety pin, put it through the elastic, and then again we're gonna insert that through that little hole opening we left, and we're just gonna start to feed that through our waistband here. And you want to make sure that your elastic stays straight and flat. All right, so we are back where we started. You want to just gently pull through the other side. Okay, and we're going to pin the ends of our elastic together. So just pin that together like that. And make sure that it doesn't shift when we go to try it on. We're going to distribute some of this fullness here. And we don't want to lose any of that elastic in the casing, but we're just gonna kind of pull a little bit around, distributing that fullness like so. Okay, so once we've gotten to this point, we're gonna go ahead and try our joggers on and see how they fit. If you need to cut a bigger piece of elastic or a smaller piece, now's the time to do that. But go ahead and slip these on and just see how they're fitting, and then come back and we will stitch our elastic together. Okay, so now that we have our elastic in and it's fitting like it's supposed to, we're going to go ahead and remove our safety pin. Pull out a little bit of your bands on both sides. We're going to overlap like this, our elastic, and we're going to do a zigzag stitch right down both sides to secure this elastic together. So I'm literally on a zigzag stitch, and I'm going to overlap my elastic just like this. I'm going to put down my presser foot, and I'm going to back stitch. And I'm going to stitch all the way down to the end of my elastic. I'm going to back stitch. And since this is our waistband, we really want it to be nice and secure. I'm going to continue to back stitch all the way. And then all the way back down. And I'm going to do that one more time. Because when you eat or whatever happens, you do not want this elastic snapping on you. Okay, so that is nice and secure. Now that it is, we are good to go ahead and pull that through. So we're going to distribute the fullness of the elastic throughout the casing, and that's just going to make that elastic flip right inside, which is what we want. So give your waistband a good stretch and pull, and just make sure everything is like nice and secure and even. So let's go back to the table. Okay, so the next thing, and we're almost done, you guys. Next thing we're gonna do is grab our twill tape or our ribbon, which I have here, and we're going to measure out our waist measurement. So whatever your waist measurement is, you're going to add to that number another 28 inches. So go ahead and do your math on that now. Figure out where you need to be. My waist is currently at 32. I'm going to add 28 inches, which is going to give me 60 inches. So I'm going to measure out 60 inches of this ribbon. This is going to be our drawstring. We got 60 inches of our ribbon. Next thing we're going to do is get our dear friend Mr. Safety Pin back in the picture, And we're going to attach the pin to one end of our tape. We're gonna thread it through one end of the buttonhole and out the other. So I'm gonna start with my left buttonhole, and I'm just gonna start threading this all the way around. So now that we have the ribbon pulled out the other side, again, we're going to pin those together, and we're going to kind of distribute this fullness here. Again, for our waistband, this is tiny. That's a short little waistband, isn't it? It's tiny. Like, by the time you have gotten any type of waistband here, you've literally like cut the waist in half. Okay, so you know, I got you guys, I got you. So here's the thing. I have recut the drawstring because it's too short as it was written. Mine would have been 60 inches long. There wasn't enough to tie. I could barely get one leg through the waist. So I recut my drawstring. Initially it was 60 inches. This is 84. So an extra 24 inches to what they suggest. And I have all this drawstring. So I am way more happy with this than I was. Way more happy. So just keep that in mind. You may need to add up to 24 more inches to the drawstring that they're having you cut, and that'll give you enough to tie. I mean, you may not want your drawstrings quite as long, but I kind of like that, so we'll go with it. Yes, we're moving on. So I am now going to tie this off at the end now that I'm happy with the length of it. I'm gonna tie my drawstrings off. Hey, we're almost done, you guys. So there we go. We have those tied off. Bada bing, bada boom. So now you can do yourself a nice little fancy bow if you want to. I might go back and make it a little shorter, guys. I don't know. But yeah, there's that. And so now the only thing left for us to do is our leg band, and we're out of here. So put your pants aside for 2 seconds. Grab piece number 12, which is the very last piece. Okay, so we're gonna take each of our leg bands separately, and we're going to match up the notches on both sides, and we're gonna stitch those together. These are pretty much gonna be the cuffs for the bottom of the pant. And go ahead and pin your other leg band the same way. And then we're gonna go over to the sewing machine and we're gonna stitch that together and we're gonna press it. We're gonna go ahead and place this under presser foot at 5/8 inch seam allowance using a zigzag stitch. And we're just gonna stitch down the band. Make sure you back stitch. How are y'all's pants looking so far? Did you try them on? How do you feel? All right, so we're done. Go ahead and stitch the other leg band and then meet me back at the table. Okay guys, so once we have stitched our leg bands, I went ahead and serged my ends. I also serged my seams. I also pressed the seam as well. So the next thing that we're going to do, and this is like our final thing, yay, we made it. So go ahead and grab your pants and get to the bottom of it. Grab your leg bands. And we're going to fold our leg band in half with wrong sides together. So kind of like how we did the waistband. So fold them in half like so, wrong sides together. And we're gonna pin this. All right, let's do this. So now we're ready to put these cuffs on the bottom here, and we're just going to put the pants leg on the inside of the cuff, and that seam is what you want to match up with inner leg seam. Okay, so you want to orient yourself with your pants. This is the inner leg seam, and that is where the seam on the band is going to go. So make sure that that is the seam that we're matching up here, the inner leg seam, like so. And then we're just gonna pin that together. And we have some notches here. We're gonna pin that together. Again, if you wanna baste your cuff together at the raw edges like we did with the waistband, might be a little bit easier. But I'm okay with just kind of putting this together as we go. And let's see. Let me see if I can find those small dots. They're very faint, but they are in there. And that's what we're matching up with the other seam. And then everything else, they want us to stretch the band to fit. So we're kind of pulling that like that as we stitch. Okay, so we're gonna do the second leg the same way. So once you do that, meet me back at the sewing machine. I'm gonna stitch on the inside. So this is the outside. I'm gonna stitch on the wrong side. So I'm actually stitching on the pants and not the cuff. Hopefully that makes sense. And I'm gonna be stitching, starting at the seam, the inner leg seam. And as I go, I'm gonna see that the pants are larger than the cuff. And in those areas, I'm just gonna slightly pull on the bottom of the cuff and I'm gonna make it straight like this. And we're gonna do our second row of stitching 1/4 of an inch from the first row. So again, I'm gonna use my presser foot and we're just gonna stitch all the way around. Stitch, and there we are. Cuff number 1 is in. I'm going to go ahead and do cuff number 2 the same way. Serge or pink your seam, and then meet me back at the table. All right, y'all, we're pretty much done. Last thing you want to do again is finish your seams of your leg bands. Go over to your ironing board and press those seams toward the pants. So up this way. Last step you're gonna have to do, you guys, after you finish your cuffs is to find that little bitty hole that we use to feed our elastic through the waistband, and get yourself a needle and thread and just slip stitch that closed. And then once you've done that, you are absolutely done with your joggers and you are ready to go. And we are done, you guys. Congratulations. You have sewn a pair of pants, some wonderful joggers that you can wear at home or out, and yeah, style them with whatever you want to wear them with. Okay, you guys, if you have any questions or comments down in the comment section, go ahead and fire away. I'm here to answer any questions that you might have. But other than that, thank you so much for sewing along with me today. Loved hanging out with you guys, and come back and join me next time. Be blessed, and I'll see you later.